narrative, then the policy section, and they are associated with the goals and policies, but the main place for the goals and policies is in the policy section. And then the implementation section kind of is more guiding towards the like the city programs, city and county programs, and some of the things that are in the implementation section would need to be further adopted into other documents or other plans that are on a more granular level to go into place. So these are kind of setting the vision for the city, but some of them need further implementation in other documents. So talking about what are the different pieces in the policy section, we have goals, which are desired results or future conditions that the community envisions and commits to achieve. We have policies that are nested under the goals and their courses of action to achieve the stated goals. And that can be text policies, but we also have policy maps. Then there's the land use categories, and these are associated with the future growth illustration, which I'll show in a second. And they're sort of guidelines that go along with the way that the future growth illustration the different categories that are in the future growth illustration. So then in the implementation section, these are two other important pieces. So there's the implementation guidelines, which are assumptions and corresponding principles that guide how the goals and policies are interpreted and applied. And then action items, which are really the actions that are suggested by the goals and policies. So these can be strategies, projects, procedures, programs that implement the goals and policies. So then moving on to maps, in the policy section, there are a set of policy maps, and those really define, for example, a future trail location or a future land use, and they're meant to enact some kind of whatever they're portraying. The implementation section also has information maps, and these are more so that you have an understanding of for example, an implementation map would be the sewer infrastructure that's in the city. But in this case, like if it was an information map, it wouldn't necessarily say that there could be an expansion that's not shown or something like that, but they're just displaying the current conditions. Whereas policy maps will have some kind of future suggestion in them usually. So this is the one of the policy maps, the future growth illustration. It looks different than what was previously the future growth illustration in the current plan. The main difference is that it's now parcel specific. So the previous map was a little more vague and had sort of vague boundaries where it showed different areas as suburban or urban, but this one really gets down on the parcel level, and we do have an online version of this map. So we encourage people to look at it and zoom in as close as you want, and give us comments on how the different categories are applied here. And you can see on the side it's a little cut off, but there's the different categories include urban, suburban, and rural, and then there's some different types within those, such as neighborhoods, corridors, and centers. And then there's employment districts and university research districts, which are in that blue color. Those include some of the more industrial areas, as well as NAU and other sort of research areas. Then the darker green is parks and open space. And then the lighter green is federal lands and working landscapes. And something to call out here is that legally in this map, we can't show private land or state land as parks and open space unless it's designated that way, even if that's something we intend for the future. So the federal lands and working landscapes category covers land that may be managed under a federal agency or a different land management plan. It may not necessarily be set aside for conservation, but it can include a wide variety of uses, including residential. Another important policy map for this commission is the parks and open space map, which also identifies these areas of future parks and open space need. So those are those sort of shapes in blue, pink, and sort of green. And this again is sort of the situation where we can't identify a specific parcel as being a parks and open space unless it already is. But we can identify areas that we want to see more parks and open space or more land acquired for parks and open space. So on the left, we have the area that's identified in the joint land use study for preservation. In the middle, there's been a need identified for a regional park in this area, south of I-40. And then there's also a need for cultural resource protection, wildlife corridor protection near Walnut Canyon and Picture Canyon. Okay, so moving on into the goals and policies. So we have 6 total, or 1 goal and 6 policies for the Parks and Recreation and Open Space chapter. This is a little bit different from how the previous plan organized these. In the previous plan, open space was sort of in a separate category from Parks and Recreation, separate chapter, but now we've combined them into 1 chapter. So several of these goals mention both parks and open space. So the overall goal is that the regional system of parks, open spaces, and community centers, which supports the region's public and environmental health, provides diverse recreational needs, is accessible to residents and visitors, and is interconnected by trails and greenways between Flagstaff, regional open space, and other common communities. So policy 1 has to do with view sheds and highlighting our defined landscapes in the region. Policy 2 is really specific to open space. It's focused the purchase and management of regional preserves and connector open spaces on protecting cultural or significant natural resources while allowing for concentrated development in areas that support housing supply and climate action. And then policy 3 has to do with urban parks and sort of the open spaces that are in our more urban areas. In policy 4, we have a policy about ensuring that as greenfield sites are developed, they include parks and open space. And then policy 5 is about regional parks. And then in policy 6, we're focusing on recreation and community centers. Then within the Parks and Open Space chapter in the implementation section, there are several guidelines that there's kind of too many to go through, but some of the key topics for those guidelines are the idea of viewshed protection and how we can support that. Coordination with landowners for conservation and preservation, for example, with the Forest Service, and also thinking about connection. There are a few that have to do with public access, parking, events, and trail hubs. Some of them have to do with what kinds of parks and open space we want to acquire, creating new parks and open space, using the existing master plans. A few of the implementation guidelines, for example, would say refer to the Coconino County Parks and Recreation Master Plan for park improvements or something like that. We also have a guideline on increasing energy efficiency and adaptability of buildings and one on community centers. So I mentioned action items earlier. The regional planning committee went through a long list of action items and selected a few to be a high priority. So there's about 23 of these high priority actions, and 3 of them are from the Parks and Open Space chapter. So these are the 3. So it's leverage available funding to negotiate for the purchase of greenfield lands for parks, open space, and trails in the J.W. Powell Boulevard extension area. Consider pursuing a county under city bond or finance mechanism to fund park recreation and open space initiatives, operations, and maintenance, and engage with the Arizona State Land Department to create opportunities for future development and open space preservation, with a particular emphasis on the joint land use study findings. Um, But there are also a few that were not considered high priority by the regional committee that I would encourage you to look at as well. These are kind of a task list for the city and county to hopefully get done in the next few years as this plan is implemented. So in addition to looking at the parks, recreation, and open space chapter, there are other chapters that have goals and policies or implementation guidelines that apply to open space as well or have some relevance. So for example, there's goal GM, that stands for growth management, which is that future development and reinvestment patterns, integrate community values, including the importance of open space preservation and significant natural resources. And then, for example, in policy RS8, which is resource stewardship, it says incorporate the protection, conservation, and restoration of significant natural resources in the development of regulations of property acquisition, particularly for sensitive and uncommon habitats and landscapes that support the health and resilience of regional wildlife and plant populations, ecosystems, or carbon dioxide removal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about significant natural resources, because that's another important aspect here. We have this map in the plan. This was also everything that was in the previous plan that shows significant natural resources. This is an informational map, meaning that it can be updated. It's not necessarily prescribing policy through this map, but it's showing the data that we were going to find about significant natural resources in the region. The greenish background is wildlife corridors, and then we have some springs and steeps and some other resources that I'll get to on the next slide. But this map is associated with a set of guidelines for protecting significant natural resources. This is a list of the different resources that were mapped and some that were unmapped, which also have guidance. So for each of these resources, there's a section in the resource stewardship and resilience chapter that talks about what are the best practices for preserving these resources. And part of why this is important and linked to open space is that we have that policy that says that we want to focus our acquisition of open space on cultural and natural resources. So this is an important tie-in for that. And really, wildlife corridors is a key resource that comes up in several places throughout the plan. So going into some ways to participate, on the side you can see the contact info for Sarah Dector at the city and then Melissa Shaw at the county. So the ways that you can participate are to review the plan and send in comments, and this could be some boards or commissions elect to form a subcommittee and submit comments together. But you can also do it individually if you choose. And that can be on the online platform Conveyo, or it can be through email to Sarah. And you can definitely reach out to Sarah, and if there's other ways that you want to be involved, attending the workshops, for example, or if you have other ideas of how you want to contribute, we're totally open to that. So yeah, that's how you should participate. And then after the 60-day review, there's this is kind of a look forward. So the 60-day review, as a reminder, ends in December. December 19th is when we need all the feedback by. And moving forward after that, staff will be analyzing and incorporating public comments and the outcomes from our testing. And if there's any complex issues that we're getting a lot of feedback on, we may elect to revive the regional plan committee and try to work through any of those issues if they come up. There'll be a final legal review, and then in the spring, the document will be sent to the Board of Supervisors, the City Council, and the Planning and Zoning Commissioners at the City and County for a retreat in March. There'll be city public hearings and then the ballot initiative. And as I mentioned, it would be next November that this would appear on the ballot. And then the county has chosen to wait for the outcome of the ballot initiative before adopting it through their board of supervisors, because us, so county residents, won't have the opportunity to vote for it the same way that city residents do. But the county board of supervisors will be choosing whether to adopt it following the ballot initiative. So that's it for my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Is that you in the slide?
Yeah.
Oh, is it a short font?
Yeah. Probably easier to recognize.
Awesome. I didn't choose to do that on purpose.
When and where are those workshops on November 13, 14, 16, and 18?
Yeah,
I missed that.
so, the 13th is at the public, that's, I believe that's might have to double check what exactly day that is, but the 13th is at the, Public Works Yard on Route 66. And the 14th is actually at the Aquaplex. That's the one on, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, and Resource Stewardship and Resilience. The 16th is at Flag High School, and that's a Saturday one, so that's kind of in the middle of the day. The other two are evening. And then the 18th is a Monday, and it's at Kroger Elementary at the Academy. But I can put our website in the chat as well, and that would be really the best place to go to see all the details for those.
Do we want to have a discussion about, do we just want to go individually and provide input, or is there a really big push from this commission to make a more formal present, more formal, and provide more formal information?
Commissioner Norton did have a message.
Oh, yeah, why don't you share that?
Yeah. He stated, the regional plan update and items specific to open spaces. I think that maybe it's just a general title. It was my understanding that this is primarily the only opportunity for the Open Space Commission to comment on this. I think she's referring to the comment period through the 19th. Even though it will come to the planning and zoning, and planning and zoning will be part of the city and council workshop in the spring, it wouldn't be in my purview to make further Open Space Commission comments at those meetings.
So
Just wanted to share that.
she's suggesting to make comments now, not then.
She's suggesting that to me that if the Open Space Commission wants to make comments, it would have to be through that comment period through the 19th of December.
Right.
And it can't be a part of her liaison work as a planning and zoning commission.
So December, the deadline for this, it may fall right after our next meeting. I'm not sure when our next meeting is, but we kind of combine November, December. Would this commission like to, I mean, does everyone maybe have a hot minute to look at the draft plan and maybe see how it has an open space component to it? And is it too much to ask that we maybe talk about it at our next meeting? Because if the closing date is December 19th, we don't have much time.
Depends when our next meeting that is, and that's the next agenda item. I looked at the calendar and I thought maybe December 9th would be a good time to reschedule. If the commission thinks like that provides enough time to discuss and prepare a recommendation for the 19th, we could do that. I think the other option would be to possibly reschedule for an earlier time, such as like the 18th of November, or set up an additional committee. And I think typically committees are like, it has to be 3 or less. Is that correct? Right. So it has to be 3 or less, so we don't have like quorum. And then that committee could review the plan and they could provide an update to the commission, and the commission can make a decision after next week.
And make a draft,
Yeah,
draft to be prepared.
the committee could, yeah.
The subcommittee make the presentation of the draft to the formal committee. Okay.
Can Deborah be on that committee?
Councilmember?
No, who wrote this to you?
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Warren.
Mayor,
Commissioner Norton.
Yep.
Can she be on that meeting, on the commission, on a subcommittee or not?
I don't know, we have to ask.
Oh, there's no reason she couldn't go.
Yeah, I guess it probably depends on the date of the committee
Okay.
and if she has time.
Sarah did have her hand up for a minute, but it looks like she put it back down.
Oh, sorry, I was just struggling with the button for a second. Thank you, Chair. I want to say that we've been to about 7 other commissions so far. I think you're the 7th or 8th in the last few weeks. And most of them have either gone with the route of putting together a subcommittee or commenting individually. And I think the reason for that is just they didn't want to have too much time. It might take a lot of time to talk through all the nuances of a 200-page document. And they didn't really want to have those conversations fully in the meeting. So I do think the subcommittee, if you're looking to have consensus comments, is a good way to move forward. If because of your meeting time being off, you need a very short extension than the 19th, we could certainly provide that for a committee if like you couldn't meet until the 21st or the 24th or something crazy. I know the holidays are in there too. But if you needed a short extension, I'd be happy to do that if it's because I realize your meeting date and several holidays overlap.
Thank you. Does anyone want to share, does anyone have a gut feeling about what Commissioner Appleton, does anyone have a gut feeling about what we should do, individual reviews, or should we make a subcommittee? Is there a strong feeling anywhere?
We
I
have-
kind of,
Go ahead, Bruce.
yeah, sorry about that. I kind of feel like individual reviews might be most appropriate here, but I mean, I'm open to either way.
I think the subcommittee would be more powerful, but along with Chair Applin, I think just logistically, individual comments makes more sense. Though 60 days seems like a long time,
It's not, I know, it's not.
That wasn't a criticism.
No, I'm just wondering, what if we suggested to our commission that we individually take a look at this and maybe a little subcommittee comes together before our next meeting that says, okay, here's all the feedback we got from everybody and just kind of puts it together versus, or we just make our own suggestions and we don't share it with the commission and we just do it as an individual.
I think I tend to agree with the response that as commission, we have stronger. We could add individual later on, but as the commission, I think we have stronger power in terms of giving that. And I like your suggestion in terms of everybody read it and what actually that have in mind that make it the strongest point or the weakness to do it. What the strongest, what the weakness, and put it all together.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw out an idea here and maybe you could let me know if I'm going the right way. But say our next meeting is November or December 9th, is that what you said?
I wanted to combine the meetings from November, December. The December 9th is a Monday that looked like it would work, but I also saw November 18th as a possible to reschedule. A subcommittee doesn't need to be on a Monday at 4 o'clock on a weekend.
Right.
It could be different time. So
What if we asked our commission, if anybody wants to provide individual feedback, they do so by the end of November, which is a month out. And then our subcommittee meets a week before the December 9th meeting, takes those individual comments and maybe make something to share with the commission on December 9th. And that subcommittee could use the comments that we made as individuals or not. But it might just be something to help draft sort of a. Or maybe you read it and decide that there's nothing in here that we need to talk about. I mean, I don't know.
That's a good comment too.
Yeah, right, yeah, we support it, you know, it's good the way it is and
We support them
yeah.
to go.
Are there people who would like to be on a subcommittee?
Mm.
To that,
In terms of the comments,
yeah,
I mean, it can get crazy.
no, we need something that's like
Right.
two paragraphs.
Everyone gets 2 strengths and 2 improvement opportunities in the plan.
Okay, I think you're definitely the leader of the subcommittee.
That'll teach you. Never volunteer. Because that way it forces all of us to really think and get to the really important parts rather than
I want
maybe
this,
this
I
is
want that.
too much at the university, but you end up with core dumps rather than really identifying important things. So I will agree to synthesize these, everyone, 2. And I'll just take it, if you give me 4, I'm just gonna take the first 2.
So there's one thing I wanted to make sure that we understand, and that is like, I think everybody reviewing the plan makes a lot of sense in taking your notes. We can't email exchange like back and forth before our next meeting because that would constitute a meeting. So, the subcommittee would have to be responsible for reviewing the plan, identifying what you think is strong or weak, and then putting together a recommendation letter, and then bringing it to the commission at their next meeting.
Right, but they don't have to review the plan, they would get all of our feedback, right?
You're saying that's what we can't.
I think like whoever makes up the subcommittee, potentially up to 3, could review the plan and identify strengths and weaknesses like you were mentioning, and put together a recommendation. But before the subcommittee meets, I don't think we can exchange emails between each other. Like if all 7 members like potentially wanted to review and then provide you with guidance, I think that would constitute a meeting. So it would be better to review the plan individually and hold another meeting, like a full meeting, if you wanted to get everybody's input.
Could we do it just like he agreed to, compile, synthesize it all, and each of us just send the email. This is my strongest
That's
point.
what you, Robert, that's what you're saying we can't do.
I think that's sort of.
But could we have an executive meeting where we just,
You have an additional meeting. Yeah.
we could just have an executive meeting, which doesn't even mean we come here, we can all just call in on an executive call. They would
Well,
make
that's
it,
open to the public.
that's open to the public.
Yeah.
They would get it from an advertiser.
I think can I clarify? I think what I,
I'm sorry, it's just, it's really hard to hear.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I think what I hear people saying is that if everybody who wants to comment ranks their first, second, third, and fourth choice, too good, too bad, or whatever you want to do, first and second. And then if they send them all to Bruce, and as long as Bruce doesn't distribute them to everybody else, then you should be good. Am I right? If everything goes to Bruce and nobody, and he
Wait, I would
doesn't.
send it to you and you send it to
Yeah.
him.
No, you would all send yours to Bruce.
Just to-
Everybody sends to Bruce, and then nobody talks about it to anybody else.
Okay, so then there's no 3-person subcommittee that puts together a draft letter, because that would mess it up. As long as Bruce is the only receiver and the only synthesizer and the only presenter at our next meeting, that works.
Yeah, trust me.
That does work because when you start emailing or responding to, that constitutes a meeting.
Right,
It can also be seen as Bruce possibly polling commission members for their votes. And that's not legal either, but as long as you're just providing your information to Bruce, and then he synthesizes it and does a presentation at your next commission meeting or a special meeting, as Robert mentioned. Whether it's all online or in person. Those options work.
Thanks.
thank you.
So no,
No subcommittee.
It is important that you do it right. None
Do
of
I
us
make
wants to go to jail.
Are we making, do we make a motion?
I think just general decision would be okay.
consensus.
Yeah, so there's a few people online, so is there a consensus that, those that get to it and make 2 strengths, 2 weakness statements about the, Flagstaff Regional Plan 2045. They're gonna be shared directly to Bruce Fox. We need to get his email. And those will be sent directly to Bruce Fox. And then he will make a presentation at our December 9th meeting, whatever day we land on. And let us know what our input is for the city plan, the regional plan.
To accept or reject. You know,
To accept and reject, and also further in terms of drafting to support this plan.
Sarah's got her hand up again.
Sarah, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to also point out that if you go with this method, Bruce could meet with Elsa and I as well if he has questions between now and the 9th. That follows the rules that Rebecca was going over as well. So it could be that Robert and Elsa and I can meet with Bruce and make sure he's not, working alone or feeling like he's the only one like having to lead it without support from staff. We're happy to set up times with him as well.
Thank you very much. That's lovely. Yeah. I don't. Okay, so do we have a consensus?
Yeah,
that sounds good with me.
Okay, that's great. That's perfect. All right, I want to keep the meeting moving.
yeah, but give it the deadline until when actually we could submit it to Bruce.
End of November. He needs them by the end of November. So it's November.
I was gonna say Friday.
You're.
Okay. Saturday. And in November, yes.
So I'm thinking November 25th. It's the Monday before Thanksgiving. And now that's 3 weeks from now. And this will go into the minutes, so you'll see it there, and we'll put Bruce's email in the minutes.
I can email you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Oh, yeah, don't make it public. Sorry, yeah. And then. And maybe just can we tell Robert that we emailed info to Bruce? If somebody wants to do that, you can just tell him that you've done your job.
You can't. I think what's best is Robert will send you all an email with the deadline, with Bruce's email address and kind of what was decided, especially for those commissioners that aren't here today.
Right.
And then when you email Bruce, you could copy Robert if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, or just separately let Robert know that it's done if you want to. But I don't, that's not required. And Robert can put that in the email as well.
Thank you. And that'll give you, it'll give you approximately 2 weeks to perhaps collaborate with Elsa or Sarah or Robert, whatever.
One clarifying question. Do we want to just focus on that chapter 4? Is it on?
PROS.
Yeah, that is chapter 6. I think you'll want to, or no, chapter 8 is Parks, Recreation and Open Space. Chapter 7 is resource stewardship and resilience, which has that tie-in with the significant natural resources, and wildlife corridors as well. So those would probably be the two most relevant chapters for this commission, but I would also strongly suggest that you look at the goals and policies chapter 3, because that's really key. And so I would say the policies section is key, and then chapters 7 and 8.
Okay.
It'd be helpful for us to. try to
Narrow it down,
focus
yeah.
Within our,
Responsibility, yeah,
okay, thank you.
and that's in the email too. Okay, perfect. All right, I'd like to, I'd like to move on to business item C, which is Open Space Commission November, December meeting dates. The issue is we have Thanksgiving at the end of November, and we have Christmas at the winter break at the end of December. And I think we've always comboed these two months together. So does December 9th, I've been working off of that one, for that last 15 minutes. Does that seem like a date that's acceptable for everybody? Sorry for those of you who are not here, who don't get to get input, but,
Yeah, that works for me.
okay, let's make December 9th the next meeting.
So we'll have to make sure, right, is that what you were gonna say?
I actually already reserved this room for that day, so we should be good on it.
Look at us. Look at you. Nice.
I did make this a decision item, so I think we have to vote on this.
Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion on December 9th being our next meeting?
I move that we have the next meeting of the Open Spaces Commission on Monday, December 9th, 4 to 6 in the upper box.
I second it.
Can I hear the ayes?
Aye.
Nays? Okay, thank you. So moved. Okay, here comes business item D. 45 minutes. Project prioritization and multi-year project planning discussion items. This was that large PowerPoint. Thank you so much for putting that all together. It was very impressive.
Yeah, this thing.
This is, yes.
Yeah, I'm just my speaking. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so this agenda item, we started at our last meeting. It was meant for, to support the Space Commission in their effort to review and identify priority maintenance projects or new amenities or acquisitions, which the BBB tax revenues could be allocated towards. So we thought that the next step was creating a list from that was designed, I guess, from the PowerPoint that we had. And so I went ahead and put together a list. And I thought what I would do is run down through these and make sure that there's understanding of what each of these topics is. And so this is your opportunity to kind of seek clarification. You can adjust this document here in person if we want to, just to make sure that there is understanding from all the commissioners what this is. And then you can discuss these items if you have further questions, but this meeting is more informational. And then what we'll do is we'll have a prioritization exercise activity for you at the next meeting where you can rank these projects on the level of importance, like on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being the most. And that will help us identify which of these priorities we're gonna plan for first and which ones are further out. Some of them, you might be like, it might be your first priority, but we won't have enough money for that until year 3. So we'll plan that accordingly. I'm gonna pause right there because Rebecca is not gonna explain this with me. So Rebecca, do you have anything else you want to add on that note?
Only if there's questions.
So I'm gonna just go ahead and run down through these. These are the upgrades and new amenities. So the Schultz Creek Trailhead, this is for designing a new trailhead and providing improvements that would enable proper parking signage of the trail system and delineation of the trail access to direct use to improved locations at the location of the Schultz Creek One. We have on past agenda that we're currently working on a property trade with the neighboring property. This would be acquiring that property and then looking at a proper trailhead installation at that location.
Can I just ask a question as we go on?
You bet, of course.
The first two talk about restrooms. Who maintains the restrooms and the garbage pickup? I just want to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Currently, Parks is maintaining all of the restrooms and they're doing trash pickup at Parks. They do trash pickup at our picture painting event.
Yes.
And they install or work with contractor to install temporary restrooms, the pickup,
Porta Johns?
for dancing. We do pay for the one number picture painting.
Okay.
So those details would have to be worked out. This particular project, grant funding could possibly be obtained for the implementation of this project, but the continued maintenance of those facilities has not been determined.
Okay, so I just think we need to, as we go through this, that's something like, is this gonna be something that's high maintenance or is this something that's low maintenance? We just need to make sure that I think when we're selecting this is our first, second, and third, that we're aware of the burden we may be putting on other resources. Okay, that's it.
I would just add,
Don't worry about it.
both trash and recycling can be contracted out, so
Okay,
it would be a financial burden, but not necessarily a staff maintenance burden. Unless we build something permanent in this case. So, I think the way that staff would use, if the commission came back and said, Schultz Creek Trailhead, everybody ranked it a 10 and it's super important. That sends a message to us like, this is important. We will put some money into the 5-year plan to start working on this. And then we will work with the commission to develop what that is.
okay,
And then we will adjust the amount accordingly.
okay,
So you really don't need to worry too much about long-term costs, initial costs. We really just want to know from commissioners which projects are the ones that you want to see in the 5-year plan, understanding that we have limited resources.
Okay.
And then it's up to us to figure out like how much and when and where. That's kind of what Robert was alluding to in the beginning.
okay. All right, so really just read these and then choose later. Okay,
Yeah, I'll go ahead and keep moving on here. But if you have those clarifying questions, please feel free to jump in. I think that's the point of this particular exercise. We have about half hour left, so. Should get through. So the picture painted toilet, this is to develop a single restroom unit for that trailhead. We currently use a porta john. So me looking into like a permanent installation. The picture canyon foots connection work. So this would be working with the Flagstaff Urban Trail System to design and build the foots connection to picture canyon trailhead from its current ending kind of over near the mall. So there would be property acquisition that would be needed, that we actually are currently working on. One of the properties is part of the 2004 bond fund priorities, so that is in our queue currently. Grant funding could possibly supplement this particular project as well, like that state parks are RDP. Questions about that? Picture canyon signage improvements, so upgrading the sun damage signage throughout the preserve to match the newest design, including the rules and regulations and other educational information. Mainly it's the interpretive signs that are in pretty bad shape throughout the preserve. And grant funding could possibly be obtained to supplement this project. Currently, the state has a funding project we applied for McMillan Mesa, and the limit for that is $10,000. Signs.
How much?
The limit for that grant is $10,000. And so the next item is the McMillan Mesa signage. And this would be to design and install new signs throughout the preserve to match the newest designs. And we have applied for that grant. And if we're awarded, that could help fund some of that project. The award notification would be in July of 2025. So questions about signage?
Are there signs on McMillan Mesa?
There are some like general signs, like no dogs out leash, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
But there's not regulation signage or interpretive signage.
okay.
The Foots does have those kind of big compressed plastic signs that have like a plastic insert for a paper map.
Oh,
So it would be replaced.
okay.
There are some. Of those. Observatory Mesa fencing. So this would be installing the wildlife friendly fencing for Observatory Mesa National Area to help reduce the unauthorized motorized traffic and minimize cattle impacts, and also to like mark the boundary to inform users that they're entering a protected natural area with some kind of signage. Similar project for Picture Canyon, especially where we're getting unauthorized motorized traffic currently, and also to help prevent a delineation between our property and the mines to prevent future encroachment.
We literally have to fence them out.
There's a section that predates our purchase of the
Yeah.
property where the mine like spilled over onto
The tail.
our current property. And so it's really difficult unless you know where the line is to know like where the mine property and where Picture Canyon actually stuff is. So I think that is something.
Did you talk to the owner
We have,
and
yes.
maybe could join in, the more funding and fencing, so.
Oh, yeah. There could be
Their
opportunity
safety,
to like work on funding a fence in partnership with them. They actually would be willing, and this was stated some time ago, but we did talk about a land trade, like for the area that was impacted or another area. Yeah, with the conservation easement, there's a lot of complications. So they traded something that already has conservation easement on it. So when we talked to the state, there's the state parks that holds conservation easement, they really weren't particularly excited about that.
We don't need any mine tailings, that's okay, so.
But the mine owner, it might be, it's like for their own safety to avoid the,
Put a fence, this.
that's the other, that's what it is.
Observatory Mesa Trail Plan implementation, so we are currently, that survey currently closed on the 18th of October. We're working on tentative data for that. That's going well, and when we eventually get to council, we hope that that plan will be approved. And then that is broken up into 3 different priorities and a long-term priority. And so it means implementation of that, which would incorporate parking, signage, potentially restroom facilities, restoration of unauthorized roads and trails, trail maintenance of current trails, and trail building. This could likely be a grant-funded project. There are several grants from the Arizona State Parks that could meet the needs for implementation. This also might be a good partner project for FTI. So Flagstaff Trail Initiative. I just mentioned those because I know last time we talked a little bit about like, well, which one of these could be grant funded or could be the supplement grant funded. So I just mentioned some.
I have a question in terms of grant. The possibility of grant, is that the deadline? So we know whether that grant will go through, or we have to find other kind of money.
Did you rephrase your question?
You're mentioning about the possibility that we could get the
Yes.
grant. When actually we will
Well,
know.
that's a good question. So if we were applying for an RTP project, which is what we currently have at Picture Canyon, we'd have to complete our RTP project, which completes in May of 2025, before we can apply for another grant.
Okay,
And then there's a review and approval process that goes through, so it could be as much as like a year until we're notified that we're or not.
so the sooner it might be the end of 25.
The one way around that is if we worked with a nonprofit like Flagstaff Trail Initiative, they could apply for a grant for our property. And then we could still have another grant under the city's name for the same project. So that is one option.
Very good idea.
Okay, I think that's good. Okay.
Picture Canyon Locust Beach Trail Spur, there is a spot off the Dunn Beaver where there's a rock art site that's being visited currently by folks who know where it is. There's pretty defined social trail there. There was a proposal that is in our management plan to look at adopting that and making it a formal section of the trail. So that's what this would be. It would mean that there would have to be like an archaeologist permit for that, which is expensive, an archaeologist on the ground to actually build the trail and formalize it. So that is why that particular project is on this list. And then earlier we were talking about the Jack Welch Memorial Bridge. The bridge is identified that it will need replacement at some point in the future. So this could possibly be an opportunity to replace that. The wood structure with a steel structure that's kind of a foot style bridge. And I believe that's all of the kind of new upgrades that are might be. Any questions about those? The next portion of the list is the deferred maintenance projects. With the Picture Canyon Trailhead entry road and parking lot. The current road ends at the Wildcat Water Recreation Facility. And then it is kind of a broken asphalt the rest of the way to our trailhead. So this project would be resurfacing or replacing that and then also replacing the parking area for the property. McMillan Mesa Trail rehabilitation. This project would just evaluate the McMillan Mesa trails in partnership with Parks, since they do oversee the Flagstaff Urban Trail System and identify where the trail needs repairs and maintenance. The same sort of project would take place at Picture Canyon. We are currently working on some trail rehab with the current grant, but this project would be to evaluate the trail system and complete repairs if they're necessary. Picture Canyon property restoration. We are currently actually working on a restoration project there that is working to restore unauthorized roads and trails. We are going to be completing that grant in, like I mentioned, in May of 2025. We have gotten to quite a substantial portion of restoration, but there is still more to do. So if we wanted to continue this project, we could look at identifying it. There's also some thoughts about expanding this to restore vegetative areas that have high infestations of invasive plants, such as along the Rio corridor. I'm thinking like west of the waterfall, that kind of section is between the water treatment plant and the waterfall is a lot of mostly cheap grass. And then the eastern side of the property that abuts private property has a higher concentration of bull and Scotch thistle. As far as restoration projects go, there's an observatory Mesa. We are actually working with the Department of Fire and Forestry Management on a grant currently that is restoring chip piles throughout the forest. And we have selected about 30 acres of numerous acres to restore. So this would be a continuation of that project. That grant funding will be spent by December of 2025.
These are existing chip piles that need spreading out or removing.
There was an old project, an old thinning project on Observatory Mesa where they chipped on site.
Yeah.
And then they scraped as much of the chips off as they possibly could and loaded them in a truck to move them. But these chip sites have between 4 and 8 inches of chips left in the ground,
Okay.
where invasive plants like bulbous we did.
And mullen.
Yeah, lots and lots of them. But that's way outside the chips as well. But we're currently working with the Department of Fire and Forestry Management to do some restorations for treating invasive plants. And we selected the highest infestations to restore. And so we're removing those chips and using them elsewhere or getting rid of them or possibly burning them with our fire department support. And then we see those. But the portion that we're getting to in that particular project is a small
Okay. Just
percentage.
if you just take the chips and take them somewhere else and spread them around, they'll kind of, oh, this is see, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that could be a continuation of this project. And I know the thing I wanted to mention is like when we do thinning projects up there currently, you're supposed to chip directly into a truck, and that is actually what they do. So like they're not trying to clean up the pile afterwards. So that does eliminate hopefully that problem.
Yeah.
And then the McMillan Mesa property restoration, this would evaluate the property to determine, property restoration area needs. And it could involve eradicating invasive plants in high infestation areas, such as right along a river trail system or right along places where we border neighborhoods and things. And if these sound familiar, we talked about all of these in the presentation last month. So this is just kind of a 2-page summary. I think it's a little bit more than 2 pages, but to give you a better idea of what we're looking at. This is the McMillan Mesa tree canopy buffer. So when the veterans home was, when that property was given to the state, we could identify the need for a potential buffer between the Foots Trail and the veterans home to provide for a better experience. So this would address some of the past impacts of that property, restore the vegetation, help control erosion that's coming down into the Foots Trail, and then help create some kind of vegetative buffer. We did do some volunteer events out there. There could be potential grant funding from Tree City USA, but it would be pretty minimal for this project. But that could be it. Observatory Mesa water tank restoration. This would evaluate our earthen water catchment basins to determine the benefits of restoring those and identify which tanks might be high priority to help retain water from the bottom.
So that means a rancher brings in a backhoe and cleans them out.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So you're not playing online.
I don't, that's a possibility.
Well.
And that is all the deferred maintenance projects that were identified for this analysis.
And Game and Fish likes that water retention one.
We had some preliminary conversations with Arizona Game and Fish, but that would definitely have to include them in the conversation if like they thought this was a priority and where they thought it was
Because
a
they have a
priority.
ton of fun too.
Yeah, and they like this.
Okay.
The rest of the list is the acquisitions that we discussed. And based on the last conversation that we had with the commission, we realized that this is a really important part of like what we will want to fund in the future. And so one of the thoughts is that we just set aside a percentage of the PPP funds that open space is going to be allocated for acquisitions. And so I just wanted to kind of provide this as a little bit of a refresher what we were talking about for acquisitions. So you know that this is something that we know that the commission feels is really important. And when we come back, we can either continue to break it out like we have it here, or we can just say we're going to lump acquisitions into a percentage of the PPP funds, and we're going to continue to work as opposed to having to go through like an entire reprioritization of like the PPP funds for acquisitions. But the things that we had talked about were the regional preserves, the large open space partial of essential to the open space system. And I know the commission has identified the southeastern quadrant of Flagstaff as being very important. And we have two areas kind of identified for that, the Walnut Canyon, which is section 30, or more in section 30, which might include section 22 and 28 for future funding. And then we have the category of connectors, that's the natural corridors that connect and integrate the open space systems, such as the foots alignments and the greenway buffer along the foots for washes, hillsides, floodplains, that sort of. And so, and just to remind me, not too long ago, we went through the 2004 bond fund priority connector prioritization. And so these priorities have already kind of been looked at by the commission, and we're more or less working on these and moving this forward as we can. So the John Wilson Powell area, specifically, we've been working on the Hoffman Kane corridor connection. This is from the city's water reclamation plant. We provide a connection along the Rio de Flag through some private property to the Forest Service to provide that connection and hopefully in perpetuity to the Forest Service.
I really appreciate that, Robert, because look at the map and what actually that would. I really appreciate that map and also.
And so this is something that we have been in conversations with our community development. They are still working on finalizing the alignment of John C. Powell. And they do know that it's important to have some type of corridor there. So, you know, we had reserved, and I think that was a commission direction, because we reserved a portion of the 2004 bond fund for this priority. So we still know that's important.
Has been for.
Yes.
Robert, quick question.
Yeah.
In the PowerPoint presentation, multiple times there's acquisition. I'm looking at the 638 acre one. It says estimated value 6.4 million, actual cost 8 million. And so what goes into those two that they are?
Yeah, the estimate, I think the first one is an estimate by our real estate. And based on the fact that, actually I have to go back and look, but we initially like set those estimates when the pros committee was working on the bond language with Parks and Recreation. And so that, I think the first number is like an estimate from the real estate help develop. And so obviously as prices have increased and also the price of the land for like development is more, so they thought that actually it would probably end up costing us more.
Okay, so old numbers.
Yeah.
We can update that language to original estimate and updated estimate or something.
Just.
Because even actual cost seems misleading because we don't know until we get an appraisal.
Right, that would seem to say that we have.
We have an appraisal, right? Yeah.
And there are rules, I think, that the city can't pay more than that appraised value for a particular piece of property. So there's that for consideration. So these are the other 2004 bond priorities, the Continental Fund. This would reserve funds potentially to help secure an open space corridor between Continental Park and Fisher Canyon. This was the #2 priority for the 2004 bond funds, but Continental One is a particularly expensive property. It's quite large, or it would be a partial purchase of that property. Continental 2 would be looking at securing property around Continental Park that could be used to meet the community's needs for a park expansion, thus freeing up city property that's already been identified for a regional park or open space and also connection to Fisher Canyon. So obviously we have some 2004 funds left, but we're not going to be able to do all these. So like the commission has kind of talked about reserving a portion of for this need, makes sense. Fort Tuthill 1 would be reserving some funds to help secure greenway buffer along the foots. This is prior to the connector 1A from Walnut Canyon to Fort Tuthill. And it was the fourth priority of the 2004 bond funds by the commission. The towns of Winona would be look at securing an open space corridor between Picture Canyon Preserve and towns of Winona Road. Fort Tuthill 2 is another location along that same corridor that was just mentioned, just a later priority 6 by the commission. And then 2 other additional 2004 bond funds that we are currently working on are the Picture Canyon Foots Corridor connection. So I mentioned about that, and the new amenities, I believe, and that was the building of the trail, and this is the acquisition of the property that would need to take place, obviously, before the implementation. And then the Schultz Creek property trade for that trailhead that was mentioned also in the new amendments. And so what we're kind of thinking is that if we reserve like a portion of the, or excuse me, a portion of the BDB funds, that they could be allocated towards these properties that have already been prioritized by the Building Space Commission, knowing that new opportunities come up and that, you know, one of these priorities we might not be able to move forward for whatever purpose, and that they could be allocated to the next priority or to another priority that the commission is.
The next 5-year priority, the next 5 years.
The general corridors that I mentioned, I think, in the presentation was between the Walnut Canyon and the Fort Tuthill, McMillan Mesa to Fisher Canyon, Observatory Mesa, McMillan Mesa, Fisher Canyon to Walnut Canyon, and then the Observatory Mesa to Fort Tuthill, and then the inner city, McMillan Mesa to Walnut Canyon. There are other properties that we haven't specifically prioritized, and are not in those top priorities from the 2004 bond fund. But then we did look at some of those. And so if the commission was interested in allocating funds to a particular corridor, we could consider that as well.
So we can either just say, okay, let's allocate funds to acquisitions, and we just let that build until there's actually some funds for acquisitions. Or at this point, we could say, okay, we wanted to get, if we're gonna say 10% of what's coming to go to acquisitions, we want to send 4% to be saved for general connector corridors. We want 6% to go to large item acquisitions. Is that what you're saying?
I think that could be an approach.
Detail.
I think that could be an approach. I think the other way you mentioned it is just percentage for acquisitions in general.
And then, you know, in 5 years from now, then the next 5-year plan, people on the commission would be like, okay, now we've got some money. What do we want to do now?
Yeah, of course, we're gonna bring it back to you and let you know, provide you an update, you know, and say like, we finally have these funds for repair.
Okay.
And I don't know if the details matter to me in programming out the funding, and Robert's saying percent, that's one way that we could go about it, a percentage of what's available as the open space portion. The way that this has worked on the Parks and Recreation side is not a percent, but just a chunk, a dollar amount, a total dollar amount that is set aside each year that either we spend or it continues to build on itself. So the idea for acquisition is that you set aside $200,000 a year. It's not much, but it's what we might have. And that just continues to build until 5 years, you have $1 million. We match that with some sort of grant to be $2 million, and then we can get a piece of property. The idea with percent, because our revenues fluctuate every year.
Okay.
And so I would feel more comfortable with it being a chunk of money. And so what Robert and I were talking about last week was, we know that acquisition is a priority. for this commission, and we have your priorities already for another funding source. But that funding source isn't going to be able to cover all of your priorities. So to me, it makes sense to set aside some funds after seeing the rest of your priorities, maybe a set of funds for those priorities and then a set of funds for acquisition to continue to build a fund balance and then continue to tackle your priorities that you've already established as those opportunities come up.
Thanks.
We don't know how much we might want to send, to have some idea.
That's the beauty of this rating exercise is I don't want you all to worry about, like some of you might naturally be wondering, like this fencing project, how much money is that gonna be?
Yes, 30,000.
Don't worry about it. Just tell us that that's a priority for you, or it's not. And we'll have to figure that out, and we'll come back to you and let you know. But
But
we're just,
we'll make this list, but then you'll come back to us and say, listen, this fencing project's gonna cost $70,000 this year, which we can do. But there's also this other project which you ranked as a high priority that's also gonna cost $70,000, which we can do, but we only do one of them.
so what I would do is knowing that both of those are priorities, we would fund one in 1 year or in 3 years. And we would fund the next, another one, and we'll bring it to you and say, this is how we put together this draft 5-year plan. What do you think?
Okay,
That's likely going to be a joint meeting with Parks and Recreation because you both have to review and approve the expenditures in the ABB 5-year funding now. And you would say, you know what, no, we'd rather swap it, or yes, that's great. So that's really our job then. After we get what's high priority to you, it's our job to figure out how to make it fit.
okay,
And it's probably not gonna be in the order. So let me give you an example. Parks and Recreation Commission did this. One of their top 3 priorities, I can't remember what number it was a girls' softball complex. That's a $50 million project, right? So we didn't fund that in one. What we did was we worked through what the other priorities are and started getting in some smaller projects and a couple of larger ones as we could. Meanwhile, continuing to not spend all of it. So there's it's building up over time. And in years 4 and 5, I believe, we have put in the 5-year plan, I believe 1.5 million for 2 years. So 3 million total. That maybe if we're lucky, we'll get us some construction drawings, a design and construction drawings. And then we'll continue to work towards, but at least it's addressing the priority of that project. But it didn't come in years 1 and 2, even though it was a top priority. That help?
yes. Okay,
Yeah, and the last category is the complementary open space that we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, about smaller open space parcels that might provide value to integrated ones. And that's all of them. So we're working on a little activity for you to be able to prioritize these. Have that available, that would be hopefully next week.
Nope, it will be next. We gotta get this done because we need to get it in the 5-year plan, which we have to turn in January, February.
whoa, okay,
So that's part of the December 9th.
Yeah, so on December 9th, and this probably needs to be in that email that you're gonna send out, Robert, about the regional plan. On that December 9th date, make sure you bring a phone, a laptop, whatever you're comfortable taking a survey. Because it'll be like a form survey, and what we'll do is you'll have a screen that shows these phase projects that Robert just went to. Let's scroll back up to one of the top projects, fencing is one that comes to mind. Schultz Creek Trailhead, that'll be on there and you'll have to pick between 1 and 10, a number between 1 and 10, and it'll be a bubble that you click. And then you just move to the next one. You could have all 10s if you wanted to. We're not asking you to pit them against each other. Please don't do all 10s. Because that doesn't help us.
If people need numbers.
No,
Five, you'll
no,
take it in five.
We're gonna do total, but worked out really well with Parks and Rec.
Okay.
You can have 9s and 8s, and that still washes out in the end.
Okay, so make sure to review what your priorities are from the stuff that Robert very kindly sent out to us, so that you are prepared to do the ranking in a reasonable amount of time, and not with all 10s. Next meeting, December 9th.
Sounds great. Commissioner Norton had a comment to share. She reviewed the list of the presentation and here's her points. So number 1, I do believe deferred maintenance should be separate from new projects and acquisitions. I liken this to maintenance of current assets versus future or new assets that be added to our asset list, which then becomes part of our maintenance of current assets. Number 2, I prioritize the maintenance of current assets over attempting to save millions for a future purchase at this time. I think it would be important to show something for the monies that will be in our charge in May, and many of those items are very much needed. I agree with the top priorities outlined in the meeting document. However, having said that, with the negotiations currently going on regarding Hoffman Tank with the large parcel landowners and the city, is there anything we need to be aware of in terms of funding specifically expected from open space? Question. I'm hoping that the negotiations are producing something in open space's favor. I watched the JWP specific plan update to council on 10/8, and Michelle put in a good mention for open space, assuring Vice Mayor Aslin that open space is part of the conversation.
Thank you.
I think that's great idea. The more maintenance and position, different category.
Unless you guys have anything else to discuss.
No, okay, we've got 3 minutes. Deborah Harris, council representation, so reports and updates, A.
Is that me?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for waiting so long.
Supposed to be here one time anyway, so.
Oh, okay.
I agree with, didn't get the name of the council person.
There you were.
Mary, but I think it's important to take care of what we have rather than trying to get more. And I don't know if, staff can take a look at all that we have and do the same thing with deferred maintenance that you've done with Parks and Rec stuff. I think it's important, to do that. I also like the idea of getting developers to give us space pieces or whatever when they're doing projects. That's one way that we don't have to pay for, that they give it to us. The Parks and Recs, even though that's not part of this committee, but I think open space, there's a park that's almost finished at the Murdoch Center, which I consider open space. It's the only open space that I can see in the South Side community. And so that we didn't have to pay for. Well, we paid for it to make it a park, but the city already owned the land. So I think trying to find places that we already own or space that we own and try and do something in terms of making it open space. And then looking at open space very broadly rather than very narrowly. I think sometimes we think about open space as Buffalo Park or McMillan Mesa, and that's our idea of open space. And I think it's important to look at it broadly, because when you look at our city, we don't have a whole bunch of land unless we buy it from the Forest Service or some other people, so. But other than that, those are just my comments. If you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer any that you might have. But you've all been here long enough, so yeah. You can always catch me on email or send me a note. I'm willing to meet with people whenever. Lots of flexibility in my time, so thank you.
Thank you. And she knows about open meeting laws. And then if the planning and zoning commission representative report,
Yeah, Commissioner Norton didn't have anything to share.
okay. And then Robert might have something to share.
Not too much, honestly. We finally finished our corporate survey for McMillan Mesa, so that's really exciting.
Super interesting.
That'll be able to support future, that'll also give us a foot in the door for grants.
Yeah.
And also allow us to like kind of apply for or identify like where we can put in projects for scientific plan. So that's really great. We also finished our Cthulhu grant. And so we are funding Ashley's position with the Heritage Grant currently.
Actually, who's right there.
Somebody, do you have any, or Ashley?
New steps at Picture Canyon, stone steps at Petroglyph Overlook, so you don't have to slide down the overlook anymore. And also the Waterburn site, the Far Vista Way site, the trail has been moved back away from the boulders, a trails with. So that work is done.
I saw that one time on Saturday.
Sylvia has been instrumental in getting all that stuff situated with our crews up there, so. That's up there. I think that's all we got.
Thank you. Crow's monthly newsletter.
Unless you guys have any questions, I don't think there's anything to add. Hopefully you guys all received it. Yeah, let me know and I'll send it out to you.
And then 8 informational items to and from commissioners and staff.
But I'll wait and the answers.
We'll jump right to staff.
So I mentioned earlier that we closed our survey for our trail plan. We're working on tabbing in data with SDR's assistance. And what we're planning to do is to come to the front of the commission and provide an update on that plan. And then share essentially what we found. So right now, just as a quick look, we did a very brief assessment where we looked at like people were very positive about the plan, people were kind of mediocre, or people were unsatisfied on these different topics of the survey. And a lot of the initial comments we can look at are kind of like in the middle. So take that for what it is.
Please some and not all. I mean, that's not bad.
How many altogether? Results of
I don't
that.
remember the total. Do you happen to remember?
319 surveys. And
319
then there was like about 120 people that came to the public
Yeah.
meeting.
So additional money.
And then I do have another item just to keep you updated on the Observatory Mesa right-of-way easement that would come through from Holland private property. The next steps for that will be for staff to assist with the presentation to the State Parks Board on the 14th of November. That's going to be it. That's all I got.
You're presenting to the state parks?
I think it'll be myself, Kevin, and so Rebecca will be there.
Okay. You don't need one of us.
And the applicant, no,
Okay.
no, we're really supporting our counterparts at state parks. They have all the information. I'm guessing they will do introductory, like what is this item, and we'll fill in the gaps and then answer questions.
And Anybody have any potential future agenda items? We've already put one thing on there, which is just the bridge and the arch. And our assessment of the regional plan. That's certainly nice. Surveys.
I think that was.
I think that'll be 22.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Second,
Does anyone agree?
yes.
Aye.
I,
Any disagrees?
you stay.
Okay, we're done.
Go to the staff hotel.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. 7 days over.
Not too bad.
Oh.
Thank you, Robert, for prioritizing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing that I have in mind. And also with the map and success here. I think you know that. Hopefully that, you know,